Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining me. My name's Shane Forth, and I'm running this webinar today jointly on behalf of the Association of Cost Engineers and Go Forth. So we're going to talk today about how to apply strategic management to your portfolios of projects and programs. But before that, especially for those of you who don't know me, I'll begin by introducing myself and tell you a little bit about Go Forth. So I've been involved in engineering construction for more than 40 years, as you can see by these pictures. Starting way back in 1979, the first one on the top left with the long hair. Last year, I set up my own consulting company, Go Forth, who provide project controls and project management training services. We also develop teaching and learning materials for the training providers. Before that, my last two roles in industry were 5 years as PMO Director at Costain and 5 years as Project Controls Head of Function at AMEC. I'm a fellow of both the APM and the Association of Cost Engineers, so I continue to do work with professional and technical and academic working groups and speak at conferences, lecture at universities, and contribute to project management textbooks. More of that later. But one of the things I'm most proud of is starting the UK's Project Controls Apprenticeship, firstly in 2007 and more recently as chair of the Project Controls Trailblazer Apprenticeship. And just at the bottom of this slide here is some of the organisations that I'm working with in industry and some of my clients with Go Forth. So I'd like to start by giving you a little bit of background to today's talk, while perhaps you're just looking at the questions on the screen and having a little think about those as well. So 15 and 20 years ago, I was writing project execution plans that set out the strategy for executing various projects. And at that time, organisational strategy was, as opposed to project strategy, was something for the main board or the C-suite as we call it today. It wasn't well communicated to the delivery-focused functional and project managers. Certainly it wasn't where I was. And with the boom and bust of the construction economy, the nearest we got to strategy management in the organisation was with superficial ideas such as bid less, win more. But that very quickly became bid more, win less in times of recession. So we quickly went back to the default position. But since then, project management's evolved, and now, as it encompasses more broadly portfolios, programs, and projects, organisational strategy has cascaded down into the project environment much more clearly. I see it much more in organisations now over the last 10 years or so. So in terms of the agenda today, we're going to look at what is strategic management. We're going to talk about policy, objectives, mission and vision. And we'll talk about the VUCA world, those words: volatility, uncertainty, complexity and ambiguity. A lot of process stuff on what the strategic management framework looks like, and the 4 stages that you see on the slide here. We're going to have some polls during the course of the talk, because I think just listening to me is not great fun for everyone, so it's better to have some interaction. So we'll have some polls, which Vanessa will launch for me when I ask. And we also have, at the end of the talk, an interactive exercise, which is to build a strategy on a page in 5 or 10 minutes, a quick exercise to show how this can be done. We'll look at portfolio analysis tools as well, and most important actually, we'll look at how people respond to when faced with strategic change, because it's not all about the processes. The most important thing really is actually getting it right in terms of people. So what you've got here is three definitions of what strategic management is. As you can see, they're actually quite similar. The message is that strategic management brings change to the organisation, that if it's realised, benefits and values stakeholders and ensures the organisation's survival. And typically this involves improvements in capability of one form or another. So internal projects may be happening within organisations to bring change about. And once it becomes the norm, then the vision for that change is realised. But if it's an internal strategic issue, then there's always a limit on what can be done because resources, funding, much of it's on the overhead. So that's why much of what needs to happen comes through programs. You've got to be very careful not to waste money when dealing with strategic management and bringing in new strategies. So in terms of strategic management, it starts with policies, objectives, the mission and vision statements. I'm looking at an example here of an organisation that wants to improve its project management capability. So what you see here is a high-level policy that the organisation is stretched out with the rules and guidelines everyone must follow in order to realise a strategy to become the best organisation and in terms of project management. And you can see that the responsibilities are well laid out. The book stops with the CEO. At the corporate level, departmental executives who report to the CEO are responsible for making sure the policy is implemented down into the projects and programs. So looking at the aspects of it, the objectives, mission and vision, objectives, according to the APM, are predetermined results toward which effort is directed. And you can see the 5 objectives here in terms of improving this project management capability for an organisation. The mission statement actually and vision statement are actually somewhat similar, but there are important differences. A mission statement actually articulates what needs to be done to realise the vision. So it's kind of in a way the journey towards achieving the vision. So you see here it's about developing, implementing and continuously improving project management processes. And that leads to the vision, which is, you could say it's mission accomplished. If the vision is realised, then the organisation has achieved its strategy and the benefits and results of that are coming through. And so the vision is often best written in the present tense because that makes it compelling to the employees of the company and helps get them on board with making the vision happen. Now, the VUCA world, we live in a world that's, and I don't think these days anything could be clearer with the pandemic and things like that and Brexit on the horizon. We live in a world that's volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous. So getting to the end date in strategy is not straightforward. Getting to that vision is not straightforward because there are all sorts of other things happening. And we can see how the dynamic world is what makes projects so challenging compared to the drudgery and routine of business as usual. I would have hated a job where I had to go in on a Monday and knew exactly what I was going to do every day, Monday to Friday. Projects to a large extent make it fun, but although it can get quite heavy at times. In terms of this VUCA world, this volatility and uncertainty, I can think of 3 projects that present that situation. A lot of you are from the nuclear industry today, I think, so you'll all be probably aware, some of you, of the Wilfer nuclear power station, New Wilfer, 20 billion, that was put on hold in January 2019 for funding issues, but now looks like hopefully it's going to be up and running, perhaps in the near future. There is talk of that happening. We also, I think we're all aware of the HS2 project and how that's been held back, and there have been government reviews of that project and it's been paused. New word in recent years, pausing a project. And where I live in the northeast, we've got the project in North Yorkshire. That's a potash mine, which is under construction. Well, it was under construction. The Sirius Minerals potash mine, £2.8 billion project. And again, that's the subject of various takeovers and acquisitions and holds and delays, and the workers out there were all laid off not so long ago. So it's quite difficult. Some projects don't even see it through. And you can imagine that that plays havoc with the strategies of the organisations that sponsor those projects. I'd like to start with our first poll now, having spoke for a few minutes. So what I'm going to do with this poll is ask you if you've heard the term VUCA before my talk today. So it's a single choice answer when the poll comes up, this Zoom poll. So Vanessa from ACOSD. Vanessa, if you could launch the first poll, please. Thanks, Vanessa. And just click your answer, folks. And submit. How are we doing, Vanessa?
I've shared the results now.
All right, let's have a look. Okay, so, well, so this is, hopefully you can all see this. So 9% of you have heard the polls. That's probably about 3 of you, I think, probably out of the attendees. And I've heard of VUCA, and 74% haven't. So that's, hopefully that's useful. That's a new term for you all that you can all relate to now. And 18 vaguely, yeah. So that's a nice quick response. I'd like to move on now to the next slide. And another poll just for now. So this is about VUCA, and now that you've all heard the term, have a think about where you think the term VUCA might have originated as an acronym, in what kind of area of work, whether it's economics, environmental, government, etc. And again, just respond with your single choice answer.
Give me a second, Shane.
That's all right. It's okay, Vanessa. Yeah.
There we go. And it's gone.
There you go, folks. Okay, let's have a look then. So, yeah, 1 in 3, near enough of you, 31% have got it down as economics, which is interesting. And I did talk about 3 projects that were paused or affected by really the economy or funding issues. So that I can see where that comes from. Government, yeah, quite a few with government, 26%. Really pleased to see that actually the actual right answer is what the majority of you have got, 37% of you have got in terms of the biggest vote, and that is the military. In fact, VUCA was first used in 1987, and this was by the US military to describe the volatility, uncertainty, complexity and ambiguity of the situation following the end of the Cold War. Following the fall of the Berlin Wall and things like that. So that's actually where it all comes from originally. So well done. Moving on now, we'll get into the process part of the talk really, and the strategic management framework, which actually involves 4 stages. As you can see, analysis, formulation, planning, and implementing and evaluating. And in terms of analysis, it's about the internal organisation, their current capability, the gaps to be closed to achieve their strategic objectives. It's about the external environment as well, existing and potential competitors, and the opportunities and threats posed by those competitors to the potential strategy your organisation might be developing. Formulation is decisions based on those analyses and examination and selection of different options, of a selected option, because there may be a number of options coming out of the analysis. And then we move into planning, which is distinctly like it is on projects with long-term, short-term, and medium-term planning. And we move on to implementation and evaluation, which is again very similar to projects. The strategy is being implemented. We need to know where we are we getting there, what's our progress, and so on. So, you know, looking at it, it's not that different actually, is it, to a conventional project life cycle, really. And this is putting a bit of flesh on the bones, really, in terms of the those 4 stages. So as I say, the analysis being very much internal and external aspects. We'll talk about PESTLE shortly. Some of you may have heard of PESTLE, some may not. And then, you know, I mentioned option selection in the formulation stage. Very objective focused, really, is crystallizing the strategy and what we're going to do, just what that strategy is. And then it needs to be budgeted and planned and timed and supported by the sponsor and the core teams and the champions who are kind of advocates in the business for making things happen in different departments or projects. And then we monitor it and deal with stakeholders, track the progress. We'll talk about balanced scorecard later as well, and basically follow through. So again, it's you know, it's rather like the project world that many of us live in. SWOT analysis is actually something that many of you, I think, will have come across. Have been involved in doing SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And SWOT analyses have been around since the early 60s, which is actually nearly as long as I have, because that came out in the 50s. It is important to remember that SWOT analysis, the strengths and weaknesses are internal, and the opportunities and threats are external. PESTLE analysis, which may be new to some of you, increasing awareness though of PESTLE analysis I'm finding in recent years deals with, if we look from the political factor on the top left, it looks at politics, economics, social factors, technology, think how fast technology is changing, legal factors, and environmental factors. In an external way, how those things can externally affect an organization's strategy. And example I had in about 17 years ago, I was working on LNG projects in China, and I found the PESTLE analysis very useful in preparing the bids, because China's not the UK, so it's a bit different. You've got to think about it and develop scenarios for those different countries. For example, we had to be mindful of the requirements of Chinese fishermen in the bid, because we were building an LNG terminal near the fishing grounds that the local inhabitants used day by day. I can think of projects since then with environment issues around great crested newts. The other factors all come into play as well. And in terms of a simple example of that, let's look at soft drinks manufacturing. There's obviously 2 major companies we all know of who make Coca-Cola or Coke, or call it what you will. And again, looking at a PESTLE analysis for those companies as they continue to re-energize their strategies. The political factors they need to consider are some countries or markets may have civil unrest. In terms of the economy, inflation is an issue, economic downturns are an issue. For instance, during the 2008 economic downturn, lots of people were laid off from work, not unlike recently for different reasons. This meant they were spending more time with friends and family at home, and actually it resulted in an increase in the amount of Coca-Cola that was getting drunk by people, because they were spending more time at home at leisure. Not sure what's happening with that these days, but there's definitely been some kind of effect. Social factors can have a huge impact. So different marketing campaigns around the world are needed. The religious festivals, some festivals may lead to more drinking of soft drinks, and some religious festivals such as Ramadan might lead to less drinking of soft drinks, and all that has to be sort of figured as part of strategy in different countries and places. Technological factors, well, you know, social media. Just today doing a webinar, and the amount of social media that's increased in recent months of necessity to some extent. Organizations with strategies must consider how they are going to reach their audience and what means of social media they're going to use these days, because it's the old ways are not the ways anymore. Legal factors could be cross-border situations, import-export regulations, those kind of things that these companies would need to consider. In terms of soft drinks manufacturers, there wasn't any particular massive effect with environmental, but hopefully that little tour around the petrol analysis gives you an idea how it works. Another tool used at the analysis stage is Porter's 5 forces framework. This came from a lot of eminent research on strategic management, which for its peak was really done in the 70s, 80s and 90s. But much of the tool sets that came out still inform us today. The details of Porter's 5 forces were actually first published in Harvard Business Review in 1979. It's still used today, and it considers the threats and bargaining power of new entrants, people moving into new markets with their business, diversifying, changing their product line, and the buyers and suppliers, the power that they have, and the rivalry between competitors. So it's kind of about what everyone else is doing, really, and how that affects your organization. There's strong links, really, between this and stakeholder management, because you can think of the the power and interest that different organizations, rivals, competitors, purchasers, sellers have in terms of products and goods and etc. So lots of things can be considered looking at the 5 forces framework. This particular slide has many of them on it, so it's a good reference for you, but far too detailed for us to look at today. So again, looking at a small example, let's take an airline company. A new airline company wants to break in to the airline industry, something you probably wouldn't want to do today at the moment anyway. And it's a hard thing to do. They need to invest to purchase aircrafts, licenses and insurances and distribution channels. All of that is hard to get when you're new in the industry. You need that capital funding. But existing airline companies know exactly how to cut costs and increase service levels, but new entrants may lack that expertise. It's not insurmountable. We've seen low-cost carriers like Ryanair and EasyJet come in and Jet2 and be very successful and introduce low-cost models. Of course, quite a difficult sector to be in right now, the airline industry, and you can imagine, going back to that VUCA world, just what havoc the pandemic's played with the strategies of airline companies, and in fact they then got to reinvent or come up with new strategies to cope with the situation that's obviously lasting for a period of time. Moving on from analysis to formulation, it's really about lots of questions. Where are we right now? Why do we need to change? What are our options? What we'd like to do? What's stopping us, and so on. We'll return to these questions later on at the end of the presentation with the exercise for strategy on a page that I'd like you all to join in with, hopefully. We might run 10-15 minutes over the 1 hour in order to get there, and I hope many of you can stay along for that. Moving on to the planning stage, strategic planning is the means for the business strategy to flow down from top to bottom of the organization. So it starts as a corporate strategy, as I mentioned, with long-term plans. Then it impacts on business units with different product lines and the eventual operating units with their short-range 12-month plans, as kind of illustrated in the diagram here. And of course, any plan, whether it's for strategy or project, will need some milestones to give a sense of direction and achievement, hopefully, along the way. So you'll have that in your initial corporate long-term plan. And so this is how it looks. You have a roadmap for 4 to 5 years. This could be something done on Visio, perhaps even on a big sheet, 1 page on the wall for the CEO and the exec board. There may be input from the business units who will produce their own medium-term plans, so they may use a planning tool like Microsoft Project or Primavera for that. And those medium-term plans for 2 or 3 years will need to be supported by the operating units and functions, or whatever you call them in your business, with short-term plans on a 12-month rolling basis, but they'll be reviewed certainly, I would say, every month, and there'll be lots of budgets and detail and resource management, I think, down in those areas. Now, the Infrastructure Projects Authority recently actually put out this diagram in a document they've released about the business case. This is new from them, and they call it the delivery pyramid. And in terms of portfolios, programs and projects, which is today's talk really of how strategy cascades down, they call it the delivery pyramid. And as you can see, there are 4 levels, starting with policy, which is where I started some time ago in this talk. We moved down into portfolios of programs and projects, which are mapped there to the products and who, in terms of the infrastructure world and government projects, who is responsible at each stage. So it all starts here with government policy, but reaches down eventually to project teams. And this is something I put together some years ago in industry, I think with AMEC at the time, to sort of show how it works in the private sector, and you can see that it's really pretty similar to what we're seeing from the Infrastructure Projects Authority. The why, the what, and the how of programs and projects that are actually the mechanisms for new and improved capability, good financial results, hopefully, enhanced reputation, and the sustainability, continued existence and growth of the organisation. Those portfolios of projects, programs and projects can of course be grouped in many different ways, such as by country, region, sector, product line, type of project, etc., geography, and so on. And this is just another way of sort of illustrating in terms of implementation now, the strategy and the planning has to be implemented, and it's implemented through that portfolio of programs and projects, whether they are internal or external. For instance, when I was at AMEC, we developed a project academy. So that was an internal project to improve the skills of our people. It wasn't the external project, it was to help us do better external projects by having more capable people. And so how that works will depend on the environment and scale and complexity of the portfolios of programs and projects. Beg your pardon. And this is just another illustration showing how that cascade works. And it's an example of how it might look in an organisation with divisions, business units and operating units that are spreading down from energy and infrastructure on one side and consulting on the other, eventually leading down to those portfolios of programs and projects. So the evaluation is the same plans we saw earlier being updated at the required frequencies, and the lower plans, of course, feed up. So the plans go top down, then the feedback goes bottom up, actually, as they would in a conventional project. But as I said, the implementation evaluation strategy is not plain sailing at all. In an ideal world, you just develop a strategy, you'd implement it, and you'd deliver it, and everything would be great, just like in an ideal project. And how many of you have been on that ideal project, I ask? So things can get blown, of course, and that's in response to changes, threats, opportunities, and issues, which can come from either the external or internal environment. So that analysis that we did at the start as the first stage of the process, those analyses need to be revisited because things change, and the original strategy may need to be modified during implementation. And some elements of the strategy may actually not be delivered. And so the portfolio management and continued balance of the supply and demand of resources is the aim of ensuring the best possible outcome from strategy implementation. So we need to revisit, we need to reevaluate, we need to modify or change the strategy. And it's a bit like rebasing a project in a sense, really. The balanced scorecard is another tool used. I hadn't seen this on projects before, but certainly in the strategic world, it came out of all that research. And to judge the success of a strategy, the business looks at typically 4 dimensions, which were the financial, the customer, the internal business processes, and the learning and growth. And then certain criteria, as you can see in the blue squares by way of example, that would relate to the sort of objectives and aims of that strategy in its broader sense. So what the balanced scorecard does really is it helps crystallize the strategy, and it's another vehicle for monitoring at that exact level whether we're getting there. But enough of process for now, a bit more later, but I mentioned earlier how important people are and how people respond to strategic change is absolutely crucial. We all know projects are unique. They are the opposite of business as usual. I would say, so if you're involved in projects, even if the similar in scope is something you've been on before, the different people will make it different. Even the same people will make it different depending what those people are going through in their everyday lives and their relationships or changing relationships with people. So human behavior is unpredictable and can change everything. So when we're bringing in organizational change, it's absolutely vital to win hearts and minds of everybody really that's affected by the strategy. And certainly, you could have a new project team, you could have key people leaving the project, new people coming on board. It's just an immense change all the way through. And that change, so I want you to think about organizational change and strategy coming in where you're not involved in the team that's perhaps leading the strategy for the company, but you're doing your day job and you're on the receiving end of the changes coming through. So I'd like you to put yourself in that place for the next few slides. And what can happen and tends to happen is that organizational change will take people out of their comfort zones. They might react initially with shock or denial to the change. And this is something project managers need to understand because they've got to help people work through and come to terms with the change. And it's where business change managers could be, or named champions or some other name, people can be introduced as advocates of the change to help support it for the people who are at the sharp end. And lots of change initiatives fail or only partially succeed. And it's due to the resistance and unwillingness of people to accept the change. Phrases that come to mind include the ones that you can see here. It's the kind of thing I've heard many times in the past when things have been changing. And don't you all think that the pace of change has actually got faster and faster in recent years? I can remember a guy when I was at AMEC, the AMEC bought a company called King Wilkinson, who had been owned by Babcock, who were previously called Woodall Duckham. So that's 4 names. And as we were buying King Wilkinson in AMEC, acquiring them, if you like, one of the people in King Wilkinson wasn't happy. He didn't want to be AMEC. He didn't actually enjoy being King Wilkinson, and he hadn't enjoyed being Babcock because 10, 12 years previously, he was a Woodall Duckham person, and this person's head was still in the world of Woodall Duckham. They'd never got past that initial shock and denial of the change, if you like. So in terms of this poll's slightly different to the other two, and I'm looking for 2 answers from all of you on this one. You've got the opportunity to put 2 answers in for the 2 strongest emotions that you feel during the times that you are faced in your day job with strategic and organizational change happening around you, and you're now having to look at doing things differently and things being different in the future. So Vanessa, if you can launch this poll, thank you, and give you a bit of time for this one for a couple of responses on each on the question. Just go with your gut feel. Okay, 37% highest figure for confused, and that's tells. I've done this webinar 3 times now, and every time confusion has come out top. And what that tells me is something that I think I've seen many times. The biggest issue with strategy is proper communication. Why are we doing this? What's it for? What are the benefits? Why do you need to change? So this is me if I was leading a strategy. And that communication, it's harder than processes and tools. Communicating and dealing with people who are unique. And it's a big failure, I think, that it's so hard that it doesn't get done very well. Feeling uncomfortable, yeah, and frustration. Those are early stages, and you can imagine the guy I was just talking about at Woodall Duckham never got past those parts. You don't always get through this whole journey. But it's good to see that we've got 33% optimism. There are always opportunities in strategy. So that's good to see. It's pretty close, nearly with the confusion. So it's fairly even there, that people can see the good potential. So really what I would say is, if you're optimistic and you're surrounded by, there are many people in your organization who are confused, try and help them get to where you are. And the same goes for trying to help the people who are a bit pessimistic, because actually if you look at it, we have got over 50%, certainly the majority of people, 2/3 really, with relatively negative feelings about it, which is about the norm. So there's a lot of people to win over. Thanks, Vanessa. We're doing quite well for time, I think. So this is the lady called Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Some of you may have heard of. This lady was a psychiatrist who worked with patients suffering from terminal illness. And this lady came up with what's known as the change curve. I first saw it in around 1999. It's been used in business management training for a lot of years, because although it was written, prepared for in the medical industry, it kind of shows the journey people might go through during times of strategic change. And as I said, some people never get past the first 2 or 3 parts. But if you can get through the other side, and the majority of people in the business can get through the other side, the strategy's got a much better chance of succeeding. So I think those emotions speak for themselves, and we've just done the poll and you've had a little think about it, but hopefully you've all seen some of this before and what have you. And that resistance and the negative feelings, if they prevail and run too deep, can cause serious failings for the strategy, indeed for the organization as a whole and the people in it. Because if that negativity prevails and people cling to the past and don't embrace the change, we get what's known as strategic drift. The organisation won't achieve its ambition. So if you look, just go around it there from 12 o'clock, you start by maybe losing ground against a competition who will also be changing, likely as not. Nobody stands still these days. You might lose some customers, so your financial returns will be affected. Your share price might go down. The company might start downsizing or cutting a few people out, may become insolvent. You might be taken over, and there's another whole load of change to be faced with. It could be a good thing, who knows? Or the company could go into liquidation and be dissolved. So in the worst case, the company doesn't exist, you don't have a job. So it really is a big, serious issue. Moving away from people, there's a little bit here on a final tool using portfolio analysis. And this is the growth share matrix, which is it's also known as the Boston Consulting Grid because the organization that established it some years ago was the Boston Consulting Group. It's got two axes. This is a 2x2 grid in a minute when you see it. It's got two axes, relative market share and market growth rate. So the relative market share is the organization's market share, or the business unit within an organization actually, its market share relative to its largest competitor. So if the largest competitor had 50% market share, the organization has 10%, then the ratio would be 1 to 5. The relative market share would be 1 to 5, and that would be considered weak. The market growth rate is used to measure the market attractiveness. Organizations want fast-growing markets for good long-term returns against investment. And while that varies in different industries and sectors, 10% a year growth is generally seen as a strong market growth. 20% would be outstanding. So this is you penetrating into a new market potentially with a product or service line or a type of project that you want you're going to be involved in, and doing more of it. So in this matrix, each business unit or product line, call it what you will, can be associated to one of the 4 categories listed below. Cash cows, dogs, question marks, and stars. And they need a little bit of explanation, really. So cash cows are business units with a high market share in a slow-growing industry. So it's well-established industry, not going to grow anymore, reached its peak, and you've got a good market share of the work. Dogs, who'd want to be a dog here, because dogs are business units with low market share in a mature, slow-growing industry, so not a good place to be. Question marks are businesses that have a low market share in a high-growth market, so there's certainly some potential there. And it's the starting point for new business units, because that's how you establish a new product line or business unit. You see a potential growth area. And stars are businesses, they're actually qualified question marks in that they already operate in a niche, fast-growing market, and they've got a high market share, so they're performing well. And the way that works is that in terms of an organization, let's say this organization has got 8 key business units or product lines, all of whom will have their own management team probably. They map those, they would have names, of course, rather than colours. They map them to the grid and position them according to the quadrant they belong in terms of how they are performing relative to those 4 areas we've just looked at. The circle is really reflecting the size of their turnover. So you can see that in the cash cows have quite big turnover. The stars are doing quite well. But the stars are in the expanding market. The cash cows are in the flat market that's not growing. You can see we've got a dog, so 2 dogs, sorry, extra one. Need to get rid of, really. Disinvest, close down. And the question marks are hopefully going to turn into stars. And you might say, well, why can't we just have all stars? Well, it doesn't work like that. A balanced portfolio needs needs everything but dogs, to be honest. It needs stars with a high share, market share and high growth. The cash cows in those mature markets with the high turnover, they're the parts of the business units and of the organization that can supply the money to fund the question marks and hope from development them into stars. So you need 3 out of the 4, those 3, in order to make things work. And that's how the desired movement looks. New businesses will start as question marks and hopefully on the top there move to the left and become stars. Those stars will eventually become cash cows. It's just the way the world works. Eventually they will end up as cash cows to fund the question marks, to become new question marks again in later years, to become stars. But if those cash cows fail, then they'll become dogs, and it'll be time for disinvestment, out of the business, close down, sell off, get rid. So I'm going to move out the slides now because we're ready for our exercise. I just need to do a little flip on the share, if I may. Bear with me. Just doing a bit of setup here for a moment. Okay, so I think there's possibly quite a few of you from the nuclear sector here today. So I've made up a kind of, it's fiction and it may not resemble exact reality. But let's imagine, and it's not necessarily feasible in the real world, but let's imagine that you're an operator. If you can only imagine you're working with an operator for nuclear power stations, new build nuclear power stations, which are a derivative of PWRs of one sort or another. And you're looking, pressurized water reactors, and you're looking to move towards HTGRs, which are high, what do you call them? Just give me a minute. I was looking this up this morning. It's a new type of gas reactor anyway. You're looking towards a new reactor technology, which is always a challenge in nuclear. We've had this with AGRs before and moving to PWRs, and we had it with the Magnox before that, and so on. So if I can ask you, using the chat and not necessarily going around the boxes in order, think about this move into a new reactor technology for an owner-operator, and just enter in chat the box number, any order you like. Don't just go 1, 2, 3. Offer me something in the box, write the box number, like number 3, and a statement, what are our options. So if you can join the chat and just populate it with things that I will then type them into to this slide when I get to this view. If you're ready to go with that, I'll take whatever comes. Is everybody still online, Vanessa? That's good. Right. That's good. Do nothing can be an option. Thank you, Andrea. There's always a do nothing option. So some questioning at this stage. What is the benefit? I think, and it might be that it's environmentally better, for example. Improve productivity. Thanks, Kim. Pilot plan, that's a good idea. Yeah, it's new technology. Thanks, Andrea. Yeah, right, we're not making the returns on investment yet, so we need to do something new, yeah? Yeah, so thanks, Kim. Could cost a lot of money to invest. David, yeah, technology obsolescence. That's it. That's what new reactor technology is about, isn't it? The need for it. Environmental reasons, yes, Jason, thank you. That's another reason to technology change. Partner up, absolutely, Andrew. Yeah, you need to partner up. You may need to merge with a company, buy a company, who knows? Partner up to share risks and costs, yeah. Good stuff coming through here. Roy, unknown technologies, yeah. Where that partnering up might come in here, unknown technology. No experience, always a challenge. Need to build a plan? Yeah. Monitor plan update regularly, right, yeah. How long have we got? So, consider supply chain investment. This is great. Risk sessions, yeah. Budget. Sounds like a project again, doesn't it? That's good. Stakeholders, local population. Risk analysis, so we got that. Yeah, invest in, this is good. Maintain safety record, yeah. Coming in thick and fast, so apologies if I missed some. Seamless transition, I like that. Okay, I'm going to call a stop there because I think we've got a, it's really good engagement, thanks. And I'd like to thank you for, I think you get the idea. And obviously any strategy would be a lot more, need a lot more depth and thought in the real world, but maybe this is a good way of just kicking off an idea. At high level, some early thinking, and or maybe it's something you could use for smaller things. You know, it's really just a fantastic contribution from everyone, I'd like to say. I'm going to stick with the slides in this view now, just to close out a few, just while we get to the finish, if I may. Just, yep. Actually, we'll go back into slide view. That's the view I should have been in, actually. So right now, I'm happy to take questions. If there are any questions, You could unmute if you've got a question if you want, or use the chat. So I'll just give it a couple of moments, see if you've got anything you'd like to ask. We are coming towards a close, so we're really good for time. I'll take it there's no questions, but happy to, if anyone wants to email me afterwards, or happy to take questions then. That'll be fine. Coming to the close, just one thing to just make you aware of, it might be of interest to some of you. I've actually done something new for me in the last 18 months. I've been working with a well-known author called Dennis Locke, who's written a lot of project management books over the years, and we have actually coming out on the 13th of October, Practitioner's Handbook of Project Controls. You can see it on Amazon or Routledge if you look now. So that's something to look out for. New venture for me to actually be not just contributing, but actually consulting with Dennis on that. And what a great guy he was to work with. That's really it for me today. So I'd like to thank all of you for joining this webinar. I hope you've enjoyed it. My contact details are there. Obviously, get back to the ACOS through Vanessa with anything. Any feedback would be appreciated. We can always aim to improve what we're doing. So thanks very much, everybody.